Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Stuart Cohen from IGI Cyber Labs. We will get started in just a second. We are just waiting for a few of your colleagues to log in, and then we'll begin today's not only discussion, but we'll answer a number of pre-submitted questions that came in, as well as you'll be able to ask questions to a couple of our MSP partners that are on the call. As well as give you a short demonstration of some of the features and functions of Nodeware. So with that, we're just going to wait for a second or two for a few more people to get logged in, and then we'll get started.
Well, I'm here. Can you tell I'm here?
Yep. Hey, Josh.
Josh,
Hey.
we can hear you. We're going to go ahead and get started in just a second.
Is there a way in this product to blank out that background, replace it with something else?
There is not.
Oh, yeah, I never used this one. I forgot about it. I went through my list and uninstalled it the other day. I'm sorry.
No worries. We're live, Josh. So.
Okay. Well, hi. Thanks for telling me.
Nice we got what you got.
You're doing great.
Yes, I feel great. Thanks.
So why don't we'll go ahead and get started. We're still waiting for a few more people to log in, but we've got a good group of people on. Once again, my name is Stuart Cohen. I'm the president of IGI Cyber Labs, a subsidiary of IGI. Cyber Labs is where Nodeware, our vulnerability program management product, sits in the subsidiary as part of the overall IGI organization. I want to thank you for attending today's session. This is something that our Nodeware Advisory Council asked us to put together. As you know, we've had a series of SMB educational webinars that we run once or twice a month that we've had about a dozen of over the last 6 months. We will continue to do those throughout 22. But we're starting a new program, this program regarding an open demo and peer Q&A, giving you an opportunity to ask some questions, to be able to see a demonstration. Maybe you're not ready for a trial, maybe you want to ask a question. This is a great opportunity to not only hear from the team, but also to hear from some of our partners as to how they use it, how they sell it, how they support it. And as a couple of people have already pre-submitted questions, how do they make money as an MSP, and what are the benefits to an organization that uses an MSP? So we will get to all of those. Also, just as a reminder, before we get started, if you've been on any of our sessions in the past, we do use a series of poll questions. I want to put up the poll question now. It gives us an idea of the makeup of the people on today's session, so we can make it as valuable for you as possible. And at the same time, I will let you know that on our upcoming SMB educational series, we have one coming up specifically around shadow IT and some of the effects that shadow IT can have on small businesses, and some things small business leaders need to do to be better prepared for some of the issues that might be facing them. Also, we have one specifically around small healthcare coming up. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Thank you for sharing the results so people can see, get a feel for the different organizations that are on here. Good cross-section of people, and thrilled to see so many small and mid-sized businesses that are here today, or people that own a business. As I was saying on the upcoming events, the unknown cyber risks is coming up on February 3rd. John, the founder of SaaSleo, will be on with us. And then we'll have the next one of our live demos and peer Q&As. John will be joining us for that, and Brad Dunn from Lightpoint MSP will be on that one as well. And then we've got a series of them scheduled in February, both webinar sessions for SMB leaders, as well as opportunities to ask questions on sessions like today. So with that, we did have a couple of questions immediately that I want to make sure we get to. One of the first questions that was pre-submitted, was if I'm an MSP, what are some things that your prospects and your customers are asking for when they transition from IT services to beginning to get into security services? Nick, I'll let you go first. Maybe you could spend a couple minutes talking about that, and then I'll hand it over to Josh.
Sure, thank you. Well, most of the time when we go to talk to clients, they're usually doing one of two things. They're responding to cybersecurity because something happened, or they are being required to do some form of compliance of some sort. And that can be rather serious. So what we're usually looking at doing is setting them up with some of the basic security layering and depth that they need to move forward with their business.
Josh, want to comment a little bit about some of the requests you get from folks? Josh,
You're muted, Josh.
Sorry, I muted my mic in case the phone rang until I found the D&D. So outside of the compliance world, I can't remember, with one exception, the last time a client asked us how they can better secure their network or what's feeling. The thing is, they trust us implicitly to be doing that. And I think it's really important for MSPs to realize that even if you don't present yourself as their bedrock of security, the assumption is there. So what I'm always looking for is some way to make sure we have our bases covered and to check our own work. And for me, that's really what the product is about. Now, prospecting with it is another interesting idea. If you're in a position where you're trying to categorize a larger or even a mid-sized site, or you walk into a lot of SMBs where they haven't ever had real security or even MSP or IT management practice, that's another reason we sometimes will, if you'll pardon the expression, whip out the Nodeware, because then we get a little idea of what's going on there when nobody else has before. So I'm not exactly sure I nailed the question, Stuart, but that's how I interpreted the question.
Yeah, no, I think that's valid, Josh, in terms of, again, the market here we're servicing, and we saw, a good part of the audience today is kind of the question of where to start, or do they know, are they ready to start? So hopefully we can address part of that through this. So.
All right.
So, Stuart, are you?
Yeah, we got another question specifically around, getting started towards cyber hygiene, right? And, Alan Alford made a comment a couple of months ago that, small businesses are getting started with, they're concerned about vulnerability management to find out what devices they have that are exploitable. They want to make sure they get alerted. They want to start with multi-factor authentication and maybe a little bit of cyber education. I'm just wondering, are you still seeing those as kind of the first things people get started with, or do you see them, Josh, as you mentioned, more from a compliance standpoint?
No, we're a lot of times, and even when it comes to compliance, in particular, early 2020, just as we were beginning to smell COVID coming, we started getting a lot of calls from companies that were looking at NIST 800-171 or in the longer term CMMC compliance. And they wanted to find out what they needed to do to become compliant. The problem was they didn't really have anything in place. 7 of the 8 didn't even have any active IT practice at all. So there wasn't crazy stuff like patching, firewalls, backup, much less DNS filtering, 2FA or IoT management. So we really had to start from scratch with a lot of folks and just explain to them, first you have to have the basics, then you can start looking at what it's going to take to address these compliance issues. So a lot of sites don't even know what they have there. I mean, they literally have no clue what their premise IT equipment is, and even less clue as to where their data lives and who has access to it. Not related directly to Nodeware, but quite a few years ago, I once went to a site with about 40 users, 3 servers, architectural firm, and they told me with a straight face that they didn't use any online. There was no Dropbox, nothing like that there. And about a month later, we presented them a list of over 40 locations that their data was in. And about half of them, that was the only copy of that data. And many of them, there was only one user that had the credentials or even knew it was there. So it's hard to overestimate how little most SMBs actually know about their IT infrastructure. And that's a challenge that we take on pretty commonly.
Nick, you want to comment?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that a lot of times when we're talking or even meeting new businesses, the answer is always the same. Well, we build security into everything that we do. Okay, so what does that mean to you? Well, I lock the door to the office when I leave. Okay, that's a good start. Locking the doors that's part of it, but you know, you're talking about cybersecurity controls, policies, procedures, the technical side of what you have to have layered and everything else. And, you know, I agree with what Josh said. I mean, there's a lot that goes on, and a lot of people don't really seem to understand what they have. So, and they always are looking for the same thing. Well, I have an IT services provider. They know exactly what to do. Well, actually, nowadays, we usually do. It just depends on how we want to budget for it and what we want to do and how we want to respond to those needs to, again, effectively defend their reputation, because that's really what cybersecurity ends up being about. It's protecting the reputation of a business, no matter what industry. Smaller organizations, depending on the industry, you know, finance, legal, nonprofit, I can keep going. They have different compliancies, and oftentimes, you know, 2018, they heard something about it, they knew it kind of happened, but over these past few years, as you move forward, suddenly it's like, oh, we really have to actually address this, and we need to address this now. And they don't know where to start. And so oftentimes we're looking at those few things that you mentioned at the beginning with that question. Yeah, we need to enable MFA if it's not already enabled, especially for new businesses that we're speaking with. For all of our businesses, that's pretty much a requirement at this point when we work with them. You have to have MFA. In the meantime, yeah, a lot of them have to have vulnerability management. And what they're finding is because of downstream compliance with other contracts and businesses that they work with, they now have to have it running monthly or 24/7. And that quarterly thing that larger organizations had a couple of years ago, that's no longer best practice.
Before we move to the demo, you know, one thing that we hear a lot is we used to do a vulnerability scan, you know, once a month, normally on a weekend, to get a feel for what was there in order to meet whether it was our NIST compliance, whether it was CIS 18, whether it was, you know, a variety of different assessments. But now either we're more nervous or now we read all the press, or, you know, CIS 18 has now changed the requirements for a program management around vulnerabilities. I was wondering, are you seeing a shift from your clients now requesting scans on a much more regular basis? Nick.
Is that for me? We're automatically shifting most of our clients. The answer is, when you're doing a single vulnerability scan once a month, or you're doing a single vulnerability scan once a year or once a quarter, which those, you know, we still have organizations that they have contracts that require at least a quarter you have a scan. The problem with that is there are updated agreements and contracts that are stipulating, hey, do you have a vulnerability management program? Well, the most important function to that is, you know, when you do it once a month, that's a snapshot. When you do it once a quarter, it's not really much of a snapshot, but sure, we can say quarterly and annually, you at least have a snapshot of the organization. But with all the vulnerabilities that are reported, the 0-day threats, the imminent risk that's coming from all different sections and corners of the globe, it's kind of tough to try to respond to that single report. And so auditors and, you know, clients of organizations that we serve, they're coming back and they're saying, well, we want to know if you have a program. We want to know how often you're doing. Is it ad hoc? Is it regular? And interesting enough, the easiest response that we have is if we're running it 24/7 and we respond 24/7, they're pleased with that. If it's quarterly or annually, they want to see the report, and then they want to see the plan of action and milestones associated with that report of how we're going to handle all those vulnerabilities found from a quarterly or annual report.
Josh, any comment you want to make?
Yeah, the metaphor you sketched out was pretty good. I mean, the annual snapshot is just that, although it's more of a sketch. The quarterly review, maybe that's some crude animation. What we need is 60 frames per second. You know, we need live, high-res video. That's the problem. Very few people that I work with, again, in the SMB space, let's say $20 million businesses or smaller, have a clue how dynamic and fluid this environment is. And to stretch another metaphor, the fluid is corrosive. I mean, they don't realize what it means not to know that as well. They're really a couple of orders of magnitude removed from the reality of modern IT security. So having a continuous scan is important. Having all kinds of layers and alerts in the background for us is important. But I can tell you that last year, we kept track of how many emails we sent out with reporting attached, and then looked at the rough number of customers after interviews that read them. Less than 1% of what we communicate about security gets read, much less acted upon or considered and acted upon. So there's two things. There's the technical aspect here, which we can address, but then it's getting their attention, and it is really hard. I think that compliance is just about the only thing, and I'm going to pretend that HIPAA isn't part of compliance because that doesn't work. But if we're not talking about HIPAA, it's just about the only thing that does get the right people's attention. And the other half of that is learning how to speak about risk and mitigation, and learning how to speak owner to owner instead of the tech guy to owner, because otherwise we end up sounding like Charlie Brown's teacher.
Great analogy. So we've got some other questions that have been submitted. If you have questions, put them in the chat box and we will get to them. What I'd like to do is spend a couple of minutes going through a demonstration, showing you a few things. We would like to have this as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions, please submit them and we will get to you. We want to answer your concerns. We also want to make sure we have a lot of people that signed up for this because they didn't want to do a one-on-one phone call or demonstration, but they wanted to hear what other people had to say. So feel free to chime in. We'll make this as collaborative as possible, and we'll help support each one of you.
Great. So you're able to see my screen now, guys, hopefully. So perfect. So I am Frank Raimondi, head of the channel development for Nodeware. I wanted to share a little bit of the screen and sort of show how the tool works for users. This particular viewpoint is from Josh or Nick's normal viewpoint of an MSP, but there's some things that you'll see here today that if you're an end user, you wouldn't necessarily see because they're taking care of this on your behalf. But if you do have an IT organization that's willing and ready to do this on your own, then you're able, some of these things you would see as well, and some of them you may not. So at this initial perspective, this is again an MSP. I can see all my customers that are on there, and you can see their individual scoring. And again, each system, each entity gets a scoring based on the vulnerability scans that we do. And at this point, you can see there's 4 customers, and we can look at this one, and there's some alerts on here. Again, this data is gathered via sensors that are on the network or agents that are on individual endpoints. We don't need to get into that today right now, but just so you know, this is sort of real time and as we talked about, continuous scanning during normal business hours. I'm just going to take an example here of Dunder Mifflin. If anybody gets this point here, you'll see what our examples are. But within that company, you can see up at the top here, you can see how many assets have been scanned, how many are currently online, and as well as how many are monitored. And each asset is getting a score, and this score of 967 is an average of all of these assets that are on that network. So you want to get up towards 999 it's not perfect, because nothing's going to be perfect and forever risk avoidance, but the higher the score, the better, and the less vulnerabilities you will have. But let's just take a look at this Ubuntu device here, and we can see, okay, so there's various levels of issues there. There's some high things that are being scored. But let's take a look at this one just as a medium level. You can see what the description is. You can see what the scoring is. And what we've also provided in the tool is some specific remedies that are suggested and what you can do to go about them. So you can see all the different information and what you either as an IT shop internally or what Josh and Nick are going to be looking at to say, okay, gosh, okay, I'm going to get on this. Here's what I got to do, and et cetera. So that's for that particular device. One other thing that we just announced a couple weeks ago is the ability to identify and integrate into the platform. We need the Log4j vulnerabilities. You've heard probably a lot about that over the last couple months in particular, and we did a lot of quick integration and development and enabling of you to be able to find the risks and be able to address them as soon as you can. So that's sort of how it drills down. The other thing that I think is important to show real quick is on the reporting. So in reporting here, you can see we can get a let's say the network report. This would be a download. You can go through it directly and pull that down. You can open it up and you can see all the data of the top vulnerabilities, of the most common, sort of how the range is within that environment, and then all the details. And again, this first three charts could be, you can get an executive report if you just want to get that executive summary, or you can go down, and as you can see down in here, further down in the report, has all that. When we drill down, this is what's produced on paper or PDF if you need it. Again, to Josh's point that you can provide this all you want, nobody's necessarily going to read it at the end user level or you as a small business, but it's there and it's available if you need it or your managed service provider is interested in it.
Can I ask you guys a question? You just mentioned something I wanted to drill down on.
Yeah, sure, Josh.
Yep, and maybe I'm violating a live webinar.
That's okay.
Caveat here, but you can. I don't know the answer to this question, so I usually would have kept that under the hat. But you mentioned Log4j. Are you guys looking at writing a report that'll show us all the instances of Log4j across our managed sites rather than drilling down site by site? Is that something that you guys could provide to us?
So Brian, why don't we ask Brian to comment a little bit about this, and then Mark, if you want to elaborate a little bit on it. But since Brian, you did a lot of the work specifically, Brian, if you're there.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Log4j detection is, currently built in, as Frank mentioned, into the dashboard, into the reports. It does come across through the alert channel as a critical vulnerability if you have those enabled. We don't have any Log4j specific reporting right now. Certainly something we could add, but it currently is just integrated as if it was another vulnerability in the system.
Okay, thank you for the response.
Sure.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to share on here, and Brian just mentioned, is the alerting. Because we're doing continuous scanning, if a new asset is brought onto your network, it could be somebody plugging in a printer in their office or hooking up a camera, whatever it might be. The alerting, because we're doing continuous inventory management and tracking, Josh or Nick or you in your own IT department would get an alert within a few minutes. And we have different ways that you can get those alerts via text or Slack channels or however you want it. But within 10-15 minutes of an item being placed onto the network, you would get an alert and be able to identify it and either fix it or quick or just acknowledge it. So one thing we can do, and one of the pieces, the last piece I'll show you here is in the same settings, how you can, there's different people that can get information on, here I'm on this. There's other people that could specifically get information and get access to the tool. So Josh and Nick might be the primary folks, but if they have somebody, if you want to go in as an SMB and go into your own environment, you're able to do that. It's not totally locked out. You would just work with Nick and Josh to get that access. So I think that's Josh. I think Stuart, that should hopefully raises a couple other questions, and I think I'll stop sharing and we can go back to.
Yeah, Nick, maybe we ought to comment a little bit more about what you're seeing from a Log4j standpoint, and both the requests from your clients as well as some of the things that you guys are doing.
Oh, for me?
Yeah.
Well, they want it covered, right? Everybody wants the same thing. They want answers. They want it now. Make sure that they don't have to deal with it. That's sort of the kind of topic that comes up. The other thing that they want is they want to make sure that they don't have to stop work or have any issues with their network while running some sort of vulnerability scanner to find this, because that's pretty serious too. So because business, the show must go on, but in the meantime, we want to be safe. So yeah, we got that very quickly. As soon as that was announced, everybody's scrambling. We're trying to pick out what to do, how to defend. We do it in attack. It's an attack of, okay, focus on what's external, focus then on your infrastructure, focus on your endpoints, and go through those levels as efficiently as possible. And of course, we want to do it without interrupting any work, any network flow. So what we liked when some of this came out was the work to be able to consistently scan. So adding a new organization, we found out that their internal IT had not scanned, they had not looked. And the response was immediate from us. Hey, we just deployed this, we see it, you need to attack this. And that was for an internal IT. In the meantime, for us, yeah, it was, we need to have answers, we need to have them immediately, and don't mess anything up. That's pretty much normal IT life, right?
Yeah.
So, we got a question that just came in asking about devices on the network. Does Nodeware cover devices that are on the Wi-Fi, both in a network environment at the work as well as in a hybrid environment when people are at home?
Yeah, I'll take the first stab at that, and then Nick and Josh can just explain how they implement. But yes, every asset, if it's got an IP address, we can identify it and track it. So again, I mentioned cameras, printers, obviously servers and endpoints, and the network sensor is tracking all of those devices that are physically on the network, whether it's a Wi-Fi or physical or hardwired. For devices that come on and off the network, such as a laptop, we have agents that can be placed onto those devices directly, and they become an authenticated credentialed scan. And so when that device is taken home and is connected to the network, it can be reporting the data via the internet into the panel that we saw. So that device, wherever it is continuously reporting and being checked for vulnerabilities.
Okay, I'll take my stab quickly. As long as it's a monitored subnet by Nodeware, yes, you can find those devices. The question is, what are you monitoring? Most of us have got one or two Wi-Fi VLANs or subnets in our sites. One of them hopefully is VLANed off with internet access only, and that's a guest network. And one of them is, when truly necessary, a network that has access internally. We don't monitor guest Wi-Fi networks for any number of reasons, but primarily because the noise in the sense of problems that we could not address would just not be worth it. We're not going to start working on endpoints that are guests by Wi-Fi at our client sites, nor do they want us to. But if they have internal access, and I only have one or two sites that we do this, but they want to be on the land, they want full access to the internal resources, then that is a subnet you want to scan. It will be noisier than you're used to. There'll be more change anyway than you're used to, but you do need to do it.
Nick, any comment?
No, that pretty much summed it up. Yeah, I agree. Trying to monitor guest Wi-Fi is not the greatest thing in the world. In the meantime, as Frank mentioned, I mean, having agents installed on everything makes it so much easier to actually monitor anywhere you're going. I know part of the question was about monitoring, you know, for example, you know, maybe your home, you know, the agent is there to monitor the device it's installed on. That in itself is usually a good feeling because you at least know what's going on with that. And let's say the kids brought home a new computer that they borrowed from their friend and we're not quite sure about it. Hopefully, we at least know what the vulnerabilities are on the organization-owned computer, and hopefully those are patched because we're getting those reports in. And then, of course, as far as the new device alerting, that always seems to be key. Whenever we install it, we start seeing that it allows us to go after potentially rogue devices. It also allows us to simply help maintain asset management and inventory. Hey, so-and-so brought their old laptop back in and turned it on. Let's see what we can do to, you know, take care of that. At least we know where it is.
We just had a site turn a Windows XP machine from 2007 on in the last few days that we thought we had. See, one of the things we always try to do is go out there and collect all the old hardware, clean it, recycle it, do whatever we're going to do. And there's a few sites that fight us, and it's usually because they know at some point they'd rather bring a 15-year-old machine online than buy one. So I encourage every MSP out there to collect every piece of old hardware you possibly can, because we've seen everything from access points to old PCs to not that long ago, a client take out a switch on the same IP as their primary switch, plug it in because it was their primary 10 years ago, plug it in and drop their entire network and just go crazy. But they did it. They thought, oh, well, it's easier than running a drop. I'll just plug this 48 port switch into the drop I already have, and that'll save me $200 right there. It doesn't always work out that way. But you know, it's a trade-off. The more you monitor, the more you know. But the more you hear, the more the noise, and you have to find the right balance.
And I think what interesting, kind of along those lines, I think we might have mentioned it at the beginning, but I think Nick said it as well. You can't monitor what you don't know, right? Or you can't protect an environment if you don't know what's on it. So, you know, that's a kind of a good feature of the Nodeware in particular, but just, you know, the value of an MSP is really, you know, for the end users on the call here is that they can help you identify quickly and, you know, remedy issues and reduce your risks, you know, as much as you're willing to let them.
You know, I want to make one comment about it as it relates to the agents and the sensors, and this has kind of been a byproduct of COVID and remote workforces and corporate devices being used at home. But because we provide an unlimited number of agents for a particular device or for sensors for a network, we've had people that have put sensors on their corporate device in their home so they can look at their home Wi-Fi to determine what Wi-Fi issues and devices might be out there that they didn't realize. And while we didn't intend to get into the home Wi-Fi cybersecurity business, we have had a number of people who've said, you know, I live in an urban environment and I got all sorts of people kind of hijacking my Wi-Fi for their own personal use, and I was able to find that with a sensor. So I just bring that up as an interesting byproduct of having an unlimited number of sensors that come with Nodeware, and depending upon who your corporate devices are issued to and how many of them are working from home, it's something that you might want to take a look at. We did get a question specifically about alerts, and you know, other than the dashboard and the downloads, alerts. How do I get alerted if a new device shows up on our network? And does the end user see it, and does the MSP see it, or is it just one level or the other? Nick, maybe you want to comment first?
Well, I think it depends on how you configure it. For us as an MSP, you know, we like to channel that into our ticketing system. So we have that set up, and you know, the alert comes in, it hits the board, dispatch looks at it, goes, oh, this is cybersecurity related, send it to the cybersecurity team. So of course we get it, and you know, of course we take a look at it because maybe it's a cybersecurity thing, but you know, sometimes it's just, you know, somebody brought their kid into work, right? So you know, it may be pretty simple. We have it set up so that you can do it, well, actually within the portal, you have multiple options of how to pipe it through. I know there's a Slack integration, for example, that's available. For us, we like it going right into our ticketing system, and from time to time, we will also set it up to send out to possibly one of our VCIOs that's working with the client. Partially to annoy him, but partially because he might actually want to see those alerts.
Yeah, all in there for the annoying thing. We have just 2 sites that actually have IT crew of any sort. And we, at those 2 sites, they also get alerts, partly because we want to let them know that there's more shadow IT, which was referred to earlier briefly, going on than they ever realized. But they have, I mean, some of them are really amazing. I feel like I call over there and the first thing I want to ask them is there an adult available? But what happens is they don't realize that there's a lot of teenagers there, not literally, and they have the keys to the Corvette. So we want to at least make sure that they hide the Jack Daniels. If they don't do something, those users will definitely put a bullet in their foot. So this helps. This helps reinforce the idea. They get the alert every time a new device, and it should be pointed out, a new device in Nodeware parlance is a previously unrecognized MAC address. So it's not that every time somebody reconnects the same notebook, we get an alert, because otherwise that would be pretty noisy.
Right, that's great point, Nick or Josh, thanks.
So we did get a question specifically about how it's integrated, and it should be, you know, a little bit. If you could talk about how it's integrated in your environment, and then what the end user client sees versus what the MSP sees, and what they have the capability of seeing. Maybe if you could talk a little bit about it from an implementation standpoint.
Josh, did you want to start, or is that for me to start?
I'll let you start because I don't want to fill this whole 60 minutes with mindless analogies. So go ahead.
But I've been enjoying the analogies. It's okay. We'll get to you though. I'll try to make it quick. So I mean, how do we integrate? You know, for us, when we perform a deployment, it's quiet, right? It's actually it's one of my favorite projects actually to do. You deploy the agents out to all of the assets on the network. You can install either a virtual appliance, you can install a physical appliance, or you can install a sensor on a server. We've done all 3 of those depending on what we're doing for deployment. From a noise perspective, what the organization sees is nothing, right? Nothing unless there's something crazy. The noisiest thing that I've seen yet is there was a printer randomly printing out some pages, and you know, of course, our infrastructure engineers call us up. And they're like, "It's the scanner! It's the scanner! It's the scanner!" And I said, "Okay, have you checked the printer for firmware updates?" "Well, no." I said, "Well, you sure it's the scanner, or is it because the printer needs a firmware update?" And they said, "We'll have to check." Sure enough, it needed a firmware update. So there's the noisiest we've ever gotten. It was about 5 pieces of paper. We found all 5. We gave them back. One did have crayon on it. Somebody brought their kid in and they were drawing on crayon. So we were sorry. We were happy to replace the paper there. But at the end of the day, what the organization sees is they see essentially what's pretty much silence, and then what they get at the end of the day or at the end of the month, we send them a report. And if anybody's ever run a vulnerability scan before on here with any product, if you have an organization with a network with, say, It could be 20 devices, it could be 50, it could be 600, it could be thousands. That means that the report itself, the massive report that you can print out, which, Frank showed an example of it, it looks pretty, but it's a lot of pages. And nobody wants to read all those pages, no matter what you do. So what we as the MSP do is we actually ingest that report, and then what we do is provide a summary report. And so what the organization sees is they see that everything is running and it's functional. They see that we're taking on the alerts, we're taking a look at those critical vulnerabilities, we're seeing the new assets. So sometimes there's communication there. And at the end of the day, they're seeing a pretty little summary report that's usually 2 to 3 pages long. And then there's a little byline in there it's not even a thread, it's just a promise. If you want to see the full report, we have it on file for you. And what they do is read it through, and it usually goes to the executives. They like reading these reports because they're easy. And they like the fact that we're identifying those top critical vulnerabilities and moving on those on a regular basis.
Okay.
Frank, maybe you want to comment on the new executive report, or Brian or Mark, you may want to comment on that as well.
I showed it briefly there. It's an available report. It's just a one page. It, again, shows the top 10, most vulnerable and the 10 most common, and then spread a little bit more. But it's again, from an MSP's perspective, it's something that the customers can integrate, understand, and if it's shown once a month, just as a progress report, or every couple of weeks, you can show the numbers changing from one month to the next, and you can report your progress and that you're doing your work. From the end user's perspective, again, it's kind of a easy, simple report that's digestible without too much of the detail. And then again, you or your MSP can get to that detailed report if they need to find out some more details. Or again, it's really just a reproduction of what's available in the platform. So depending on what your access is, or your account, your service provider's access is, he can get to that live anytime he wants as well.
We did get a question about the effects on the network, and I know we spend a lot of time talking about network degradation and the fact that people can use Nodeware during normal business hours and get the alerts without any network degradation. Maybe it'd be better, coming from you two, maybe Nick, maybe start off with, is there anything that you do specifically from a configuration standpoint as it relates to number of devices or continuous scanning or normal business hours?
I'll tackle that. It's easy. No.
Yeah, go for it.
No, I haven't ever experienced, and if you call a client, you tell them, we're putting a new device on your network, we want to make sure that you don't notice any degradation in performance. We should be smart enough to realize that they will now notice the degradation in performance. It's the negative placebo effect. You have to be careful how you couch things like this, but I have a couple of sites with IT people who kept a real good eye on this, and those sites have 100 plus assets on both, and they have told us not a thing. And we run it here with about 20 assets in our business, and absolutely no overhead that I've ever been able to notice. However, Nick brought up a point that is really funny because it just happened to us. We had a printer that was spitting out a few pages of gibberish once a day, and we could not figure out what was triggering this. And indeed, we did eventually narrow it down to the Nodeware scan. In their case, however, because it's an SMB, they had a 20-year-old printer, and there is no firmware update available for it. And we ultimately had to exempt it from being scanned. They're not going to replace it, and nothing's going to stop that from happening. That is the only side effect, I guess you'd call it, the only counter indication I've ever seen. We're used to running products where the problems sound like the end of a new drug commercial. This drug will keep you alive. Caution, this drug may kill you. We haven't actually experienced anything like that at all until those pages started kicking out, and that's recent, by the way. So it lasted a few weeks. A few weeks. Figured it out and got rid of it. But there's just no overhead, no footprint. I'm sure 2/3 of our sites don't know this is going on because they don't look at the email. But it is pretty I hate saying it's set and forget because it's not. We work based on what it does. But I can say that it is transparent. People just don't know it's there.
Yeah, Josh, we're going to get in trouble because we talked about, it printing out pages. They may never have us back, but yeah, no, the answer, I mean, as far as configuration, it really is, it's you can install it on any number of different environments. Having the agents is one of the most fantastic things because, really I've had, and especially with higher operational maturity level type clients where they're, waist deep or even shoulders deep in security and compliance requirements and everything else. I get that question, right, from IT directors, and those IT directors, they're working for that organization. They're going, well, what about Sally? She's working from home. How do I scan her machine? Oh, well, we have an answer to that, right? In the meantime, yeah, for other, let's say other products that we've used before, you have to tell everybody to shut down, or you have to tell everybody to go home. Then you're going to scan it just on that network, and everybody shut down their computer, or the computer is now safely in their car while they're driving home, or they've left because they've got family or friends or whatever that, obviously pre-pandemic that they're seeing. But that's the kind of thing that we've seen before, and that's one of the things that we've struggled with. And so, yeah, it really does come back to what's the noise? Well, if the noise is no, then they love it. If the noise is something, we don't like it because that means we've got to schedule resources sometimes at different times in the evening or whatnot to run. You'll often see something that's aggressively running and it takes 24 hours to run. And so people will come in the next day, or they'll log in and connect to the network the next day, and they're wondering, everything's slow, what's going on? So for this, for how we deploy it, we don't do anything special. We install, we start it running, and we kind of focus on what's important, and that is actually seeing the reports, actually looking at those vulnerabilities and tackling those, rather than the maintenance and overhead of just trying to run the scanner itself.
That's great. Great value.
Terrific. We have about 10, 12 more minutes. Please submit any other questions you have. We have a couple more that have come in, but if there's a question you want to make sure gets answered, please put it in the question box, put it in the chat box. We have a couple of poll questions. There we go. Thank you very much. Wanted to put this one up. We did get a question, obviously, from an MSP that said, do you have a sales or marketing team that can help us with opportunities? And we provide for our partners custom registration links that allow them to, through their email campaigns, through their social media, through their websites, they can register people for sessions like today or the SMB educational webinars. And for anybody in their network that does register, we give them those registrants back. So they have an opportunity to follow up with people that might be interested that can't necessarily get to a speaker that is available through their network. So I wanted to make sure we answered that question specifically.
And Stuart, I can add a little bit from the sales and marketing side. So myself and John Buffarella on our team, if you've got an opportunity, you want to, your own private demo, we can set that up and we can do that for you. Or if you'd like to, bring on your customer with us, we'd be happy to enable that and just, do the kind of demo we did today, or however you like. We do have some resources available for partners on Kickpost, which is our kickpost.io, and you can search for Nodeware and request access to. It's basically our portal instead of having our own individual portal, where it's kind of a shared site where you can find more information from us and connect with us. So we can send that out as a follow-up. But if you just do a search for kickpost.io and then search for Nodeware, we can connect on that way as well.
So we're going to take this poll question down, but I will tell you that the results were that 20% said they used them. No, there you have it. 20% used an MSP and 80% handle their own technology and cybersecurity in-house. So we, we clearly work on both sides of that. We would prefer to, line up the organizations to work with an MSP to provide that local support and local assistance. But we want to make sure we're doing the right job educating businesses on what's needed to be aware of the issues that they face as it relates to cybersecurity specifically. Before we go on to the next question, or I should say the next question that just came in was about implementation. And do you have, Josh, we'll start with you. Do you have any clients that implement it on their own, in their own systems, or do they all provide it? Do you provide it to everybody over a cloud?
I do not have anybody that's implemented on their own. We have a lot of folks that if they mistype a URL, they call us or open a ticket to say the internet is down. We just don't have people that are going to do that. Even with the physical sensors, you still have to plug a cable in properly. And with the exception of the IT sites, the 2 sites with IT, they wouldn't be capable of doing it. But it just so happens that I always use these kind of situations as an excuse to be out on site in person and shake hands, walk around. Although the last couple of years that's been a little more challenging. But anyway, I go out and do this. There isn't any reason they can't. If you're doing this with a physical sensor, it could scarcely be more simple. You plug it in and make sure it has power. But in our particular portfolio, there isn't anybody that has done it on their own.
Nick, any comments?
We've actually had a few organizations with their own IT that like to do it themselves. I would say they get usually about 95% of the way there themselves. As Josh meant, I mean, as Josh said earlier, if you are installing a sensor, it is very easy. If you are pushing out agents, then there are a couple different ways of going about doing it. And installing the agents is very easy by itself, but trying to do it to several hundred or several thousand endpoints can sometimes be a little exhausting if you want to go and touch every single machine. So, we've gone through that process with some of these organizations, and we help them with the automation, whether they're using an RMM or whether or not they're just simply using GPO. And even with that, it's a lower overhead for time and setup.
Great, thank you very much. We had one more question specifically around how do you work with your clients to determine when you use a sensor and when you use an agent?
Well, it comes down to resources, right? So if in the world of virtualization, with hosts and everything else, depending on how they're feeling, and what they're looking at with what they have, it depends on whether it's in the cloud, whether it's on premise, that sort of thing. So we do help them determine that depending on resources and how it's set up.
For us, we've always stuck with the little appliances, the sensors. I really like that. I'm kind of a hardware guy anyway, but I like the fact that it's a dedicated unit, that we're not dropping any resource, or not using any resources of existing equipment. Most of our sites are still very premise centric, and there's no reason we couldn't run it that way. It's just a question of habit. But few of our sites would we consider spinning up a VM. For us, it's going to be service, or it's going to be the device.
Okay.
A dedicated VM for this. I'm sorry.
So we have a third poll question. I want to have the third poll question put up now. And then while we're doing that, Frank, maybe I'll start with you. Any other, closing comments you have about either the demonstration and what people might want to be aware of, or how they can go about getting a separate demo from us as well?
Yeah. So I mean, simplest piece to request demos, you can go on to the website, and if you're going to the partner page, if you're an MSP, you can go to the partner page and request a demo there, or just on the main landing page, nodeware.com, you can look for that. But we'd again be happy to do a demo at any time, just let us know. Again, it doesn't take a lot of time, so we can get through it quickly. And then if we can determine if you have a managed service provider and IT support, we can work with the appropriate folks to enable you to get the access. We do as well a 7-day free trial, so you can run it on your own device. So you don't need a provider to run the trial. So again, we can get that going for you pretty quickly. And I think in the follow-up email, we'll send my contact information. So if you have any Nodeware questions or you want to connect with Nick and Josh, you can email me and I'll divert or answer the question directly or provide it where needed.
Nick, any closing comments from you?
Well, thanks, Stuart and Frank for having me on here. I do actually enjoy talking about vulnerability scanning. And it's nice to be able to talk about something that, we're seeing so much success and we're seeing a lot of success with the organizations that are implementing this. And hopefully that will continue.
Well, thank you. Thanks for being on today, and thanks for answering the questions that have come up. Josh, any closing comments?
As an MSP, for whoever's out there doing this, I just wanted to say that one of the greatest benefits of this for us has been checking our own work. A few years ago, when we fired this up in our own shop first, we found that we were still running SMB v1 on our network, which shocked the heck out of me. I couldn't believe we had missed that, but if you know enough about this, you realize that switching to V2, V3 doesn't actually defeat earlier protocols. We then ran it on a bunch of our networks and found it on 4 more. So that, had it been exploited, and that's an easily exploitable, unauthenticated protocol, could have led to some serious damage, especially in the world of ransomware and lateral movement. And this, it paid for itself for the year right there. It was great. Now, of course, we ended up with finding somebody had a 20-year-old MFC that couldn't get upgraded firmware, and that led to a whole nother can of worms. But the reality was, it was still the better choice. We pulled SMB v1 in real time. We did it that day everywhere. And then we dealt with the fallout and helped everybody figure it out. But I didn't know it until we ran this.
That's a great story. It's something about, you got to take care of yourself first, and then you use that as an example when you help others. So
I think you have to put your mask on first before you help the people around you. But, there'll be a lot of MSPs out here probably telling themselves, yeah, I would have never missed that. And there might even be a few that are right. But I would have been one of those people 3 years ago, and I am not now.
Well, we just had a client the other day that runs a lot of Windows 7 devices. So we understand issues around that. We also just launched a partnership with Security Studio that provides very specific assessments for K through 12 and state and local and higher ed and small healthcare organizations. So it's interesting just watching different small businesses. There's 2.3 million small businesses in the country. The vast majority of them have never run a vulnerability management scan, don't know what devices are potentially exploitable, don't know if a new device shows up on their network, what might happen. So, and the last poll showed that, 43% of the people said they don't run, vulnerability scans on a regular basis. Therefore, they can't provide, to your point earlier, a vulnerability program management. They can just show a snapshot or a sketch, which I thought was a great analogy. So
well, the vast majority of the clients that we encounter or have in the past don't even know what resources or what's happening at their site, where the machines, what they have. They just don't know this. So we're busy, trying to figure out if they know exactly how to get somewhere, and they don't even know where they're going. So we really do have to, we have to look at that level of expertise in the majority of smaller SMBs. Again, let's say under 100 seats without competent IT staff.
Well, we're at the top of the hour. I want to thank everybody for participating today. We'll follow up with an email with everybody that registered and attended. And if they didn't make it, we will have this available. The recording will be available on YouTube early next week. Also, just to remind you, we have these upcoming events coming up, specifically around unknown cyber risks. This is part of our public service announcement educational series on SMB webinars. And then we have another one of these sessions, Nodeware Live Demo and Peer Q&A, coming up on February 10th. So I want to thank everybody for attending. I want to thank our guests today for participating. We appreciate everything that you've done. And if there's any questions we can answer, anybody that wants to try the product or anybody wants to get connected to Nick or Josh, we'll go ahead and take care of all of that for you. So just get a hold of us through info@. And with that, I want to tell everybody to have a great morning or a great afternoon, depending upon where you are. And we will talk to you soon. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you all.